Hey guys, it's Kevin again, the scoring review for Mad Men, Season 7, Episode 12, Lost Horizon. I am so sorry it's taking me so long to review this episode. I've just been really preoccupied this week. I've had so much to do, and there were so many other things I needed to review first. So finally I can review Mad Men. Plus, when it first came out, I was, really tired that day. I've had really bad allergies all week, if you guys can't tell. I'm trying to do as best I can. But, let's get into this episode because this was another amazing episode. I was definitely looking forward to this episode. Finally, I can talk about this episode, which I love this episode for many reasons. I mean, I did not think it was as good as last week's, but I thought this still was an amazing episode. I absolutely loved it. And one of the things I love about the show is that it really is getting very realistic. A lot of people talked about how realistic this episode was. And this episode was really about where do we go from here. Now that everyone's gone to Mccann, where do we go? And I was wondering who's going to get to go to Mccann, who's going to have to move on with their lives, and it seems like pretty much everyone has to move on. But let's get in this episode, and it really shows the impact that everyone's dealing with because there definitely is a lot to talk about. So Don gets onto the elevator with a crowd of others, and we see that he's already at Mccann, and it was cool to see that they just completely left Sterling Cooper. Even though people weren't happy about it, they left Sterling Cooper, and his assistant's waiting for him so he won't get lost today, and she says his new apartment will be done next week if he'll just pick up some paint colors, and she shows him something she found while packing, and it's cash in a diamond ring, and she asks about furniture for his new place, and Meredith luckily is there. I was happy that Meredith was there, and she reminds him that he's taking Sally back to school tomorrow and tells him Jim Holbert is back today, so no napping. So basically, I like that they are talking about him getting a new place because, he is homeless, so Don hears a wind whistling and pushes against his window to check for leaks, and Harry is at the old office moving the computer out, and Roger's there and says he came to hand over keys, and Harry's pleased to be moving and sasses Roger, and then Dawn comes over to Roger, and probably one of Roger's worst fears happens in this scene. She basically tells him that she took a new job at Travelers, and he says he hates Caroline too, and at first he thinks she's kidding, and she says advertising is not a comfortable place for everyone, and it's kind of true what she's saying, that advertising, it's really not comfortable for everyone. I can understand what she's saying there, and she thanks him, and says he's very amusing. He says a fat lot of good it did him, and I like seeing her just leave. It's a very small thing, but it is a pretty big thing as well. Because, of course, they were very worried. Dawn, Shirley, Caroline, they were all worried that they weren't really going to get to go to Mccann. And Shirley didn't go. Dawn did go, but now she's leaving. And I think it's just because they want to move on to bigger and better things. While Mccann is good for them, they just want to move on to other things. Because, as Dawn said, she's not really comfortable with advertising. She's just not really comfortable with it. So she wants to move on to bigger and better things. And I like seeing that. Plus, it's the 70s. It's no longer the 60s where women don't have as many rights. I mean, women are definitely starting to get rights here, and I like seeing that. So, that's definitely something I love seeing. And that's something that really I think Dawn's always wanted, is just to move on with their life and be able to make that choice, and now she can. I think that's awesome. And it's really showing, that's how you end a good arc, definitely, with something like that. So Libby and Karen come say hi to Joan, and they're copywriters, and they tell Joan if it's in or near lady parts, they're on it, and she asks if they just came in or to get on her business, and Karen says if she wants them to let her know, and Joan says Peggy handles all their accounts, and Libby says they'd love to share the crumbs with her. Then they invite Joan out for a ladies' night with them, and Joan says once she's settled, then she will come with them. And Peggy shows up back at the old office with her box since her office in Mccann isn't ready yet. And I was thinking Peggy was going to take that job and not going to work in Mccann, but it seems like she is, and she has to work from there for now. She's the only person still at Sterling Cooper, which, of course, as they said, they want to keep her there. So, she's getting ready to leave to Mccann, but she's the only person that's not at Mccann yet. By the way, guys, sorry about the screaming children outside. I have no idea what that's about. Those are neighbors. I don't know why, but Don comes to see Jim, and he politely asks about his vacation, and Don says Ferg has been a good tour guide. Jim says Ferg is a good impressionist, and he asks him to do one of Don, and it sounds like Nixon. I thought that was kind of funny, definitely. And Jim tells him they bought an agency to get Miller beer for Don. He says Don is the white whale he's wanted for a long time, and says he expects Don to bring things up around here, because obviously he's now his new boss. Jim Holbert is his boss now, and I like seeing that. I like seeing Don get this new boss and have something new to do. And Don says he'll try his best. They tell him to drop their names to get dinner reservations or out of parking tickets. And they tell him that Miller is coming tomorrow and ask him to introduce himself. And Jim is thrilled when Don says he's Don Draper from McCann Erickson. And basically, Joan calls Avon, and this guy Dennis, interrupts her call with this stupid chit chat, and Joan's rolling her eyes. He's just like telling her whatever, and she doesn't really care. So she ends the call with Barry, and Joan tells Dennis that Barry's in a wheelchair, and she told him that, and says he shouldn't have asked him to play golf. And Joan chews him out about all his mistakes. She says she can't believe him, and Joan's furious and says she stayed up all night on the briefs, and he doesn't seem to care about keeping these accounts, which he should care. And Dennis asks her who she told she got to get pissed off, and Joan takes a deep breath and says to read the brief before their next call, and Dennis says to do it herself and says he thought she was going to be fun, and he stomps out. So that was kind of interesting. So there's a knock on Peggy, and it's definitely showing how this is really making Joan very stressed out and things like that. I mean, she really wants to focus on Avon, and that's something that I definitely like seeing. So there's a knock on Peggy's door, and it's Marcia, and she has flowers for her, and she says the flowers are Mccann, and they were sent for all the new secretaries, but since Peggy's not there yet, she's getting them there. So Peggy's upset and asks if Marcia told Dawn, and she says she took care of it, and Peggy asks what happened to her things, and Marcia says that Peggy can work in the pool for now, and Peggy refuses. She won't step foot into the office until she has an office, and I think it's really good what Peggy's saying, because why get there when you don't have an office? Like, what are you going to do? She says she'll be at Sterling Cooper, and Marcia says she'll let them know, and Joan runs for the elevator, and, now she's not going to have an office. I was wondering how that was really going to be. So Joan runs for the elevator, and Don holds it for her. He calls her stranger, and she says she's homesick. This is really the only happy moment of the episode. You can see that Joan's not happy at all. She's not happy McCann Erickson, and that's interesting because Joan's usually the one that's really perky and happy. And yes, she's sometimes a bitch, but I really felt for her here, and I definitely love that. And the only happy moment is her seeing Dawn, and he calls her stranger, and she says she's homesick. He says it will take some time to settle in, and asks her to come by for a drink. Joan asks when she'd have time to do that, and says they don't share any accounts because he's too important. And she says it's been a little bumpy. He says he can still interfere, but Joan says she'll figure it out, and she asks for a lunch date, and he says soon. And Dawn's assistant shows him a layout for his apartment, and he points out design and says she's his decorator now, and he'll pay cash, but she says she's happy to do it. So Pete and Ferg are heading into a serious briefing when Joan comes looking for Ferg, and he says he has time to see her now, and she says Avon doesn't like Dennis. They don't like Dennis, and they think he's, way too much of a chit-chatter, and he says he'll take care of it. So Peggy heads back to Sterling Cooper, and she sees her boxes there, and she asks if he's been making long-distance calls all day, and he says Stan called and left a message, then shows her a sketch for Dow, and she tells Ed that he could end up working for Ken, Dow, or her. So she has to now make a decision of who does she really, who does Stan could end up working for her, and I definitely see this happening. As I said, I definitely see this being Stan working with Peggy. I see that definitely happening, and I really want these two together, honestly, and if they work together, that'd be awesome. So she asks Ed why he didn't do the one thing she asked him to do, and he says he quits and takes his stuff and walks out, and he tells her once she gets settled, and I thought it was kind of funny that he just, quit on her, but he tells her when she gets settled in Mccann to give him a call, and she promises and he leaves, and I'm pretty sure that's never going to happen. I don't think Peggy's going to Mccann. I think she's going to Stan. That's where I think she's going. So Don's shown to the Miller Beer meeting, and it's huge, and Ted says this is only half the creative directors at the agency, and Don's pretty stunned at this, because the guy from research says that the diet beer is an opportunity to stimulate their imaginations, and he says to imagine, and I love this presentation. It really reminds us of Don's presentations, and he says to imagine a man who lives in Middle Africa, the beer belt, and Don looks at all the corporate drones moving together, and he says the guy used to play sports. He cracks a mid-joke. Don looks out the window at the Empire State Building and a plane flying by. He's really bored by this presentation, which I can understand because it's not the most interesting thing. And the guy's just going on and on about this diet beer, and Don could give two less shit. He literally walks out of the meeting. I thought that was hilarious when he just walked out of the meeting. It really shows that this is a very boring job, definitely. He's used to, because Don usually gives the presentations, and I think Don's just thinking, holy shit, my presentations are so boring, and Don usually makes his presentations interesting, but this guy's just going on and on about stuff that Don really doesn't give two shits about, and I thought that was really funny. So, overall, I definitely enjoyed that, and I thought overall that was just a really funny scene, I have to say. I enjoyed that overall. So, basically, Ferg shows up to Joan's office and says he has news, and he asks if it's too early for a drink, and she agrees, and he says he spoke to Dennis and says she needs to see it from Dennis's side, and says he has a wife and 3 kids and can't work for a woman, because obviously that was unheard of back then, and Ferg says he didn't come down to upset her, and says she needs to keep her status on her account, and says just the 2 of them now, and they toast, and he says first thing they need to do is pay Barry from Avon a visit and apologize, because they do want this to go well, and I like seeing that. I thought that was well done. And we now see why Dennis was like the way he was with Joan. You know, he just doesn't really want to work for a woman because he has a wife and kids and he just wants to, you know, stay faithful to them. And I can understand that. So Joan says she doesn't want to put him out, but Joan says it's too much. And Ferg mentions he's looking for a good time and about getting to know her. He says she can call Charles Butler on her one. And Ferg takes her hand and says from now on, nothing comes between him and her business. He says she can't lose the accounts or else what would she do? And I'm just thinking, you're really putting too much stress on her because she's already going through tons of stress, and this is just making her more stressed out. You can definitely tell that Joan is very stressed out. So Betty is reading when Dawn shows up, and I love seeing this, because again, one of the things I love is that even though Betty and Dawn, you know, they are divorced, they're still happy together. Unlike Dawn and Megan, who I'm pretty sure we're never going to see her again. I'm going to be honest, I don't think we're ever seeing Megan again. I think the only time we'll see Megan is if Dawn finds out that Marie took his stuff. That is the only time I think we're going to see Megan, is, you know, if he finds out what happened with Marie. So he asks why Sally left without him, and she says she told Sally to call and says they can't get mad at Sally for being independent. He asks if she's okay, and she says she threw out her neck carrying $100 of textbook at registration, and he says she's getting old, and she reminds him that she's always been younger than him, and he rubs her neck for a minute and asks when the boys are getting home. It's kind of a fun scene. I enjoyed seeing it. She says 6:30, they're both at activists, and she tells Dawn she's always wanted to go back to school, and he tells her to knock them dead. He leaves, and I just like seeing their bonding overall. I definitely like seeing that. I think it's well done that they're still friends after all this, and I think that's just really good. I definitely love seeing that. And if we get a scene like that in the series finale, I'll be very happy with that. So Peggy's alone at the old office trying to make instant coffee. She burns herself and curses. She spills her coffee, shrugs and leaves it, and you just see that things are just not really going her way. You want things to go away, but it's not. So Dawn drives down the road looking really strange. I think he's just kind of trying to figure out where he goes, because he turns on a signal, heads off the PA-NJ exit. I think also because of the fact that he wanted to go to Mccann, and now he's realizing how boring it is. He just really questioning what direction he wants his life to go in. So Joan lies in bed with Richard and complains about work, and she says she asked the wrong person for help. She says she's not walking away from the $500,000 they owe her, and Richard says there's 2 ways he deals with disagreeable people. Take them to court and cost them some money, and he says the second way is to call a guy, and she asks what a guy does, and he says the right guy just has to show up. She asks if he's really done that, and he says yes, and she says he's disturbed, then kisses him, and I thought that was a really good scene. I definitely enjoyed it. And I like seeing these two get close, especially that Joan's not really happy. Richard seems to be making her happy, so I like seeing that. So Don drives and listens to the radio, and he's in Cleveland, and we see Bertram in the car, kind of giving him a little bit of pep talk, and I like seeing this. He's talking to him, and Don says he must be tired. He knows he's dreaming, and Bertram asks where he's going, which is a good question because I myself am wondering where he's going. And Don says he's headed to race in Wisconsin, and Bertram asks if he's going to see a waitress who doesn't care about him, and Don asks if he's, and I love that he said that because it's true. I mean, that's really what he does, and he asked if he's read the book On the Road, which I haven't read that book either. Bertram said he's in a shining car on a road with a ghost, and I like that Bertram saying that because it's really just showing that Don doesn't really know what he's doing, and I thought that was really well done. And especially because we haven't seen Bertram, I like that they are finding clever ways to keep him in the show. That's something I definitely like seeing, because he is a very good actor, and he is a good character. So I like they are finding ways to keep Bertram in the show. That's definitely something I'm enjoying, and I think they're really doing a good job with handling that. That's definitely something I love. So next day, Peggy's at the old office when the phone rings, and she goes looking for the ringing phone and answers it, and it's Marcia who's calling on the payphone, and she asks what Marcia wants, and she says she has her new office, and Peggy says she can come now. Marcia asks if it's a drafting table's okay, and she hears organ music and asks if someone's there. She goes to look around, hears more organ music, she follows the sound of the music, and Roger's right there, and that was kind of funny. She scares me, reminds her that he has a heart condition, and she says creepy organ music is scary too, and he says he went to a bar yesterday, and she says they screwed screwed up in her office. He wants her to go get some booze, and she asks if he drank Vermouth, and he says he's afraid he would, and I like seeing their bonding too, because it's reminding her of the good times, and it seems like for all of them, they're not happy unless they're working together, and that's definitely something I love seeing, is the bond that they all have. You know, Peggy, Dawn, Joan, Roger, Pete, they need to work together. They're a team. They've been together from the beginning, and, well, not necessarily Peggy, but she's become such an essential part of the team, and so close with all of them, that they need to work together to be happy. So Joan gets chocolates from Ferg and is annoying. The car says pick a weekend, and Jim comes ranting to Meredith about Dawn missing meetings. He asks if Dawn is on a bender, and she says he went to take his daughter to school and says she's not interested, but she is. Dawn's on the side of the road, stretching his legs. He goes off to take a pee in the woods, and Roger looks through his things while Peggy sits on an upside-down trash can. He tells her to make Mccann wait, but she says this is not fun. He hands her a picture, and he says it's an octopus pleasuring a lady that was in Bertram's office, and she says she wants people to take her seriously, and he says he gave her something, and says she should sit and keep him company, and I like seeing this scene, definitely, because it's just showing that they're both not really happy, and Peggy says it's the most attention she's ever gotten from him, and they really haven't had any other interaction besides this, and I like seeing this. And he says the floor he's on is like a nursing home, and that honestly is the best way to put it, because it honestly is very boring. And she says he sold them out and was supposed to watch out for them. He says this is the business and you can't get attached to walls. And Peggy says she hopes to have that problem someday. He pours them more booze, and Peggy says she knows will be challenging, but that's good for them. He talks about the war in the Pacific. He says one hot day they dropped anchor to take a swim. He says it was a 2-story drop off the cruiser, and he says he was scared and needed a push, but he did it. He calls their business a hell of a boat. They toast and drink, and Peggy says it looks good now, but says it was miserable when he ran out, and Roger asks if that's how she'll remember this place, and she says no, which I'm happy that she did say that. He pours them more, and she says this is one for the road. He asks if she's going to show up to drunk at 4 on her first day, and she laughs, and I thought that was really funny. So Don shows up at a house looking for Miss Bauer. He says he from Conley Research and says they represent companies including Miller Beer. He hands over the research guy's business card and says her out of 900 entries, she was chosen to win a refrigerator full of Miller Beer. And she says that sounds wonderful and says she's Laura, not Diana. And he says he's supposed to speak to Diana and asks if that's her mother. He can't find Diana. Diana's still gone. And she says he really should speak to her husband, says that's his ex-wife. He says he can wait in his car, but she caves and invites him inside. She offers Don some iced tea and says it's no bother. And a young girl lurks nearby and asks if he's looking for her mother. She says if her mother wants something, she should get it, and Don says that makes sense. So she walks away, and Dawn looks really confused because where the hell is she? Like, where is Diana? Why does she just leave him? Why does she not want to be near Dawn? Like, what's going on there? I don't really know. So Joan comes to talk to Jim, who, now, did Diana somehow find out Dawn's secret? I'm wondering if maybe that's what happened, that she might have found out Dawn's true secrets about who he really is, and maybe that scared her off. I mean, that's happened with many people. That's why him and Betty split, so I can understand that. So Joan comes to talk to Jim, who says he hopes she finds things satisfactory. Joan says she doesn't think her accounts are getting the right kind of attention, and she says as a partner at Sterling Cooper, she had a certain amount of status. He tells her to speak freely, and she says Ferg is not a good match, and he says she's lucky Ferg takes an interest, and Joan says she's been handling her accounts on her own, and he says her status has changed, and Joan says he must not need her accounts, and Jim says he doesn't care about Sterling Cooper partnership, and he says maybe someone left it to her in their will, and Joan says she's happy to take her $500,000 and be on her way, and Jim says people must tell her she's the kind of gal who doesn't take no for an answer. He says to find a way to get along or expect a letter from her lawyer. She says she wonders how many women there would be like to talk to a lawyer. He says women love it there and says she'll be all alone. So maybe Joan will finally get something she wants. She's gonna be by herself. I mean, Joan's always been for women and wants to work by herself and doesn't want men defining her, and that's something that Joan might finally get. And she says she'll have Betty Friedan in her office and the ACLU in her office, and Jim says Mccann buys tons of space at the New York Times and says he can get them to print Mein Kampf if he wants to. He offers her 50 cents on the dollar to go away, and Joan says she's not negotiating. Jim takes a deep breath, tells her to get out of his office immediately. He tells her go on, says he'd rather give the money to a lawyer, and Joan walks out. So I'm wondering if Joan might rethink this, but now it just seems like it's too late because she refused, so I don't really know what's going to happen there. So Laura chats with Dawn until her husband comes home. She introduces him and says Diana won some kind of prize. Dawn says there's some confusion since Diana Bauer entered the contest and is nowhere to be found, which is just really weird. He says Diana never entered any contest, and he says his wife doesn't even know any better, and demands to know who Dawn is, and he threatens to call the cops, and Don sighs and says he's right and says he's sorry for the ruse, says he works for a collection agency, and he says he needs to know her whereabouts, and her ex says she's in New York last he heard, and says that's all he got. Now, where she went, I'm not really sure where the hell she went. I mean, where is Diana? That's really what the big question here is. Where did Diana go? Why'd she leave Dawn? I don't really know where Diana went. I mean,
Hey guys.
definitely, I don't know. Now, of course, Diana and Dawn did have that whole affair, so I definitely feel like she does not want to let her husband know about it, which is understandable. But here's the thing. She revealed so much to him, and she was so open with him that I feel someone told her about Dawn's secrets. Now, I said that Dawn's gonna be the first, man open with her about that. But now that Diana left him, I mean, I feel like definitely she found out. I'm not really sure, though. We'll see. So the ex says he lost his daughter to God and his wife to the devil, and I thought that was just a crazy scene. He tells Dawn he can't save Diana, only Jesus can, and he tells John that Jesus can help him too, but says not to come back, and, yeah, so I thought that was really interesting. So Roger and Peggy are drunk in the old office. He smokes and plays the organ. She roller skates around. They're just having a good time. And Dawn drives again and smokes. And Roger comes to see Jim and said he had a lot of stuff to move. And Jim asks where Dawn is. And he says he walked out on Wednesday and hasn't come out. And Roger says Dawn did it. And Jim says he's canning Joan and doesn't want to hear her name again. And Joan's getting fired. So Peggy comes to Mccann with the octopus sex picture, smoking a cigarette. She looks pretty badass, honestly. So Joan finds Roger in her office. She says she's there and doing her job. He asks her to close the door, and she does, and he says Jim isn't afraid of her. He says he came to say he can't help her. She thanks him. He says she won't do better than 50 cents on his dollar, and she says it's not about the money, and Roger says he knows it's all her fault, but she started something that could leave her with nothing, and he says Jim is good for the money, and Joan sighs and takes the photo of her son and her Rolodex and says to tell Jim he has a deal. So she took it. She took the deal, and I think this is honestly the best thing for Joan, and I love that. So the question is Jim going to let her take the deal? Because obviously he said he's going to can her, so we'll see what happens. So she walks in, Roger isn't happy, and I think he's not happy with what's going on Mccann overall. So Dawn dives on past a tractor. He sees a hitchhiker, pulls over. The guy says he's going to St. Paul, and Dawn says he can go that way and tells the guy to get in. And the hippie says he doesn't want to take Dawn out of his way, but he insists it's not his problem. And the episode closes with this song. I thought that was a really good ending overall, and that's how the episode ends. So overall, guys, another really solid episode. I definitely really enjoyed it. A lot to talk about, though. First of all, Dawn. Where happened with Diana? Where's Diana? Why'd she leave him? What's going on there? Diana, I think, left Dawn because she doesn't want, to ruin her relationship. She doesn't want to cheat on her husband. She wants to pretend like it never happened. Or did she find out John's secret? I feel like that's definitely, there's also a possibility that she found out John's secrets, or she just wants to be a good mother to her kids. I mean, there's a lot of possibilities what could happen there. Peggy, do you think that Peggy is going to work with Stan? I feel like that's where we're heading here. I feel like pretty much everyone's going to leave Mccann Erickson because, let's face it, it's a terrible job. Nobody's enjoying it. Roger's not enjoying it. Peggy's not enjoying it. I mean, no one's really enjoying it. And Joan, I think, is going to stay there because she's going to get the respect she finally wanted. But I think Roger's going to leave. Peggy, I think, is going to go with Stan. I think she definitely should try to take that job because her and Stan, I think, are perfect together. And definitely, I think she should try to take the job. I think that's probably the best thing for her. But we'll see what happens there, I guess. As far as the whole thing with Joan goes, I think Joan did the right thing in taking the job. But is Jim going to let her to? Jim definitely seems like he's a lot tougher than Roger, and he's not as close with them. And I'm very interested in seeing what actually happened there. I love seeing the scene with Betty and Dawn. I thought that was really good as well. But I really like what this episode's setting up. It's definitely setting up directions that these characters are going in. I definitely love seeing that. But that's basically my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys saw this episode. Overall, guys, thought this was another amazing episode. Also, is Don questioning the direction of his life? I definitely feel like that's a big question, is where is Don actually going? Because I really don't know where he's going to go in the series finale. I'm very interested in seeing what's going to happen. We have 2 episodes left, and then one of them is the series finale, and I really am looking forward to them. I have to say, these last 2 episodes have really paid off for the final season, and I think this episode was just as good. I love the direction we're going in, but that's my review. Hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in my next video, which will be for a movie review, so I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.